as the premium widens.
I wanted to ask you a couple of non-crypto currency questions, but investing questions before we change the subject totally. One of which is, how do you guard against your own prejudice and bias, and also against this character quirk that I think you have, which is that you're so contrarian by nature that I think when really smart people like Warren and Charlie oppose something, you actually get almost more excited about it. Like, what do you do to kind of guard against your own prejudice and your own personality quirks?
Oh, I don't have any, William. I mean, no, just I would actually dispute the first thing, which is to say that I'm a contrarian by nature. So, I would say that, in philosophic terms, I'm not a naive contrarian. I'm not, if there's a lot of enthusiasm for something, I don't immediately say, well, then because everybody likes it, I don't like it, or everybody hates it, I like it. What I do is I try and understand what the prevailing views are, and where, either there's a lot of exuberance or a lot of fear and pessimism, and just see what the evidence is on both sides. And we know from the psychological literature and from Kahneman and Tversky that the coefficient of loss versus gain is 2 to 1. So that losing a dollar is twice as painful as making a dollar, or winning a dollar. And so therefore, so in order to get people to bet, you've got to give them 2 to 1 odds just to basically risk a dollar on each side where the odds are 50-50. They won't take that because they're afraid of losing. So when you have a market that's got 2,052-week lows and 6 new highs like we have today, then there's basically owners of 2,000 of those companies really are unhappy because they lost money last year, the last 12 weeks. So as I've said before, the only thing better than a stock at a 52-week low is a stock at a 3-year low, or a 5-year low, or a 10-year low, or an all-time low, because then everybody hates it because they lose the money. So at least there's a prima facie case to take the other side, and let's take a look at really what's the case here. So, but again, if you see Warren and Charlie and Jamie Dimon and all these people dumping on some financial thing, as I wrote in a shorter letter in 2017, you have to have pretty good evidence on take the other side of that one, because they're rarely wrong about stuff like that, and especially when they're all lined up, some of the best financial minds in the country. Then it's like, I gotta have a pretty big threshold to go against them and try to understand what they're saying about stuff. But mostly with Bitcoin, it's been the case that people basically make up their mind first and then look for the evidence, the confirming evidence. Again, with Warren and Charlie, it's easy. It's not a productive asset. Game, that's all they need to know. And therefore they don't like it. Charlie thinks it's evil because it's anti-government, and the government monetary system has all these laws in it and stuff that have been built for a long time and protect people. So it's even worse than that, because it encourages people's greed, and it encourages people to behave outside the bounds of the regulatory system. And he thinks that in itself is not good.
For me, the whole argument over Bitcoin, I think that's been really interesting to me. It just seems such a perfect example of people filtering things through a bias, and it just reminds me very much of something that you got me to read maybe 20 years ago, which was an essay by William James. I think it was on a certain blindness in human beings. Maybe it was a talk he'd given in the 1890s, where he talked. This really had a kind of life-changing effect on me, because he talked about going to a forest in North Carolina that had been just absolutely ravaged. And he said it was like an ulcer. He said it was just absolutely hideous with no redeeming characteristics. And then this mountaineer comes to him and says, no, this is like a triumph of human spirit. This guy has built his little cabin for his wife and babes. And then William James takes this and says, yeah, and if this guy came to my study in Cambridge at Harvard, where he was teaching psychology at the time, he would have thought, God, how strange the way this guy is living. And I just thought that was a really beautiful insight into how just how blinded we are by our own prejudice and bias.
I think I'm not sure it's in that essay or in another one. I think it might be in that one. Um, does he refer to Robert Louis Stevenson's story in that one or not?
I don't think so, but I may.
Okay, then it's in a different one. He refers to a story in a different essay by Robert Louis Stevenson called "The Lantern Bearers," and where it's a similar kind of thing where Stevenson's writing about that they had these what were called bullseye lanterns that were these small little lanterns, and they hide them in their coats, and they go places, and then they were dark and they could take the lantern out and see. And he's like, when other people think it's really stupid to be doing this because you could burn yourself and set yourself on fire, and he's like, we're never happier than we're all together with our lanterns, hidden and going and doing stuff together. And then he pivots and says, again, it's the same basic thought. And he says that so in his study on Beacon Street in Boston, he said, his dog is completely insensitive to the idea of why would you sit there in a chair and stare at something all day long, like a newspaper or a book, when you could be out sniffing the ground and chasing squirrels and running around and doing stuff like that. It's just not. And he says, of course, I'm completely unmoved by the fact of sniffing the ground and chasing other dogs around. So that that's not what I want to do. It's the same kind of thing as you have a certain set of attitudes. One thing that I always use in terms to protect yourself against stuff is like when I see a statement that can be quantified, but there's no quantification. There's just emotional description, or I just say a normative description. Then I'm like, well, okay, where's the evidence for this? And so it's like they say Bitcoin's a climate catastrophe. It uses more electricity than Argentina. How much is that exactly? Maybe we know how much it is, right? It's basically, according to the Cambridge Energy Institute at Cambridge in the UK, it's 0.62% of the electricity usage in the world. So it's less than it's basically all the Bitcoin in the world is less than 1%, but a little bit more than 1/2 of 1%. I mean, laundry is used like 7%. Air conditioning uses a lot more than that. And so we say, oh, why don't we just turn the air conditioning off and so we don't use all this electricity or contributing to climate change. Like, it's just, I mean, I think actually there's more natural gas flared many times than Bitcoin usage, but we don't stop using natural gas because it's worse than Bitcoin.